John, what is the question that you are asked most often about breaking into television, and how has your answer evolved over the years?
Well, a lot of writers have an interest in television, but they see it as this, this castle that they have to get into that's very difficult to get through the wall. And so they want to know how specifically do you do that. And what they think is the answer is that you come up with a spec idea for your own TV show. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You can have a great idea for a TV show, but it won't matter unless you have a tremendous amount of experience writing for television, writing on a television staff. So the process that a writer needs to go through is to first of all write a spec script for a show that's already on the air. And what that means is you want to focus on a particular show that, first of all, that you like very much, that you really know top to bottom. It's a show that should be very popular so that it's going to be running for a few years. And it should be a show that is highly regarded. In other words, it was constructed well. Its critics really like it. The reason for that is that when you write a spec script for a really good show, it improves your writing as well. It shows you off. And what you do then is you study that show very carefully. You come up with an idea for a script for that show. You write the script, and then it's important to realize that you're not writing it because you think you're going to sell that script. You're writing that script as a calling card, which will then be sent around to various TV shows, and this proves that you have the skills to write at the professional level for television. One other thing I would say about this is that the primary emphasis in television is being able to crack stories really fast. In other words, to come up with a new story for that show at a really high rate of speed, because TV has this time element that is much more intense than film. So you've got to be great at story. And this is the primary skill that writers need to emphasize.
So one should realize that they need to pay their dues. They're not going to be just plucked and unknown, and their idea is going to just change everything. They really have to start from the ground up.
Right. With film, it's a little different. Keep in mind, you can write a spec script for a film that is actually good enough to be bought and might even be made. This is not the case in television. In television, you've got to pay your dues, and the steps of paying the dues are much more, they take a much longer period of time, but the payoff is tremendous. And the steps that you're looking for then are, you write the spec script, it's a good calling card, somebody hires you to be a staff writer on the show, you then get experience writing for a television show, then they might give you the opportunity to create your own show. That's the ultimate payoff.
And why? Why are there two different ways of doing things? Is the television, it's because it's already established, there's a show, there's a whole system in place, whereas each film's its own separate unit?
Exactly. With the film, you can come up with a great script, with a great premise that is a highly commercial idea, and even though you won't have a tremendous, say, amount of experience as a professional screenwriter, because it's a one-off, because it's a single unit that is going to be made, you have a chance of it being bought and made. Whereas with television, when you're creating a TV show, basically you are creating a big business. This is a show that needs to run minimum 5 years. So with anywhere from 13 to 24 episodes per season. So you're talking about, in some cases, for example in Seinfeld, almost 200 shows that they're doing over the course of the history of that show. So you've got the amount of money that is going into creating and sustaining that show is just immense.
And going back to whether your answer has evolved over the years, was there a time when you thought that a virtual unknown could break into the business, and then you see that it just doesn't happen that way?
It's funny because people always want there to be an evolution in terms of how you break in, but it's remarkably the same over the years. This has been the way you break into television from the very beginning. Now, where it has changed is in the film area. Because in the film area, the typical way was you write a spec script, you try to sell that spec script in a nice big spec sale. Now, what's happening now though is that with the internet and the ability to make a short film and post it so that anybody can see it like that, it's a huge change. Because in the past, when you wrote this spec script, you had to get it into the studio. And unless you're a writer with an agent, which most writers do not have that agent, you can't even get into the studio to have it read. Once it's in the studio, then it has to get through a reader. And readers say no 99.9% of the time. If it gets through the reader, it then has to go to a story executive. And the story executive has to say, I really like this. So you got to get through all these obstacles. And keep in mind, the story executive doesn't have time to read your spec script, because the only time they have is on the weekends, and they don't want to spend their weekends reading your spec script. All of a sudden, you get this huge game changer with the internet, because you can post 5-10 minute short film, short video on the internet, and anybody, including that story executive, can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes to take a look at that video. And now that doesn't guarantee that all of a sudden, you're going to get a deal with the studio, but it gets you entrance, where before it was so much more difficult to get through that door, even to be noticed.